Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Well, welcome everybody. I'm here with Laurie Carlson today. I'm so excited to have her as a guest on our show today. And we're going to talk today about how highly sensitive people can make the shift from life supporting our work to work supporting our life and our relationships. Because at least my philosophy is we have this one life. Like maybe we have more, but like this is the one we've got right now. And I think Laurie and I would both agree that our job as coaches is to help people really have the best experience of this life as possible. And in thinking about this episode, I kept coming across studies and information about what people like you and I regret most at the end of their life when they're looking back on how they chose to live their lives. And lo and behold, no surprise for me, is that many of what people most regret is having had unfulfilling relationships, particularly romantic relationships, but also friendships. And some of the other ones, I won't go through all of them, but a couple of the ones that stood out to me is I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Another one is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And another one is I wish I'd let myself be happier. And this just really speaks to me because I think it can be so easy as humans and as highly sensitive people to let, and in our Western culture, to let our work kind of take precedence over the rest of our life, and to not on purpose, but to by accident, as a result of that, the experience that we have of our lives and our relationships can kind of suffer. So Laurie and I are going to talk about how you can let your work support your life. So welcome, Laurie. Will you tell us a little bit about what you do and what brought you into coaching highly sensitive entrepreneurs and empaths?
Yes. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here for this conversation.
So glad to have you.
Yeah. So what I do is, and I loved how you put this when we were talking before we hit that record button. You're talking about how I coach people in their relationship to their work,
yes,
whether that is in a job or as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And that is so true.
Mm-hmm.
So what I help people do as empaths and highly sensitives is to understand how we relate to our work differently and how our sensitivity, nobody has ever really taught us how to effectively manage our trait in general, and therefore in relationship to our work. And
yes,
we're trying to do it like everybody else, and we can't. And so in my practice, I work one-on-one right now. I help people to approach their work or their own business in the way that they need to, so that they can create success for themselves and stop kind of running into those roadblocks of, doubting themselves or overworking or, just feeling like they can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So what brought you, what kind of hooked you into this? What brought you to this particular aspect of working with highly sensitive people in the relationship to work?
So in my past career, I was a psychiatric nurse and a social worker. And then after my kids were all in school, I decided to go back and get a graduate degree. And I was getting my graduate degree in organizational psychology and leadership and working in corporate. And I had never had a corporate job. I'd always worked in healthcare related fields. And I was like, these people need my help. And it was just really interesting, all the dynamics of what was happening in more of the business landscape. And so it was during graduate school that I was introduced to coaching. I was raised by therapists and raised in a community of therapists all around me. And I had never heard of coaching before. And so I was like, okay, coaching, this is my thing. I love it. And so that's how it all got started about 8 years ago.
So it's, as I was thinking about this conversation, I was thinking about how, and you just mentioned it a minute ago, how one of the things, and I see it with my clients often actually, that we highly sensitive people can end up doing is what you called overworking, or just, and I know this has been my work too. So this is why I'm so excited about this conversation. Over the last year or two, one of my prime areas of growth has been learning how to not overwork. Like, I love my work, but I also have found myself getting like overly sucked into it to the expense. Is that the right way of saying that? At a cost, right? The cost of showing up more fully with my family and doing some of the other things that I want to be doing with my time and my life. And so do you find that putting work ahead of life in some ways, not consciously, but by accident or unconsciously, do you find that that's kind of a common thing for highly sensitive people, or the people that you work with?
Oh, absolutely. And that's for a few reasons. I think it's true for everyone, highly sensitive or not, just because of the culture that we live in.
Yeah. That
when you meet someone, you learn their name, and then you learn what they do.
What do you do?
Totally. Yeah. And so it's like, that's just kind of hammered into us, that our identity is what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or what are you going to do? I mean, because we start asking children when they're 3 years old, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Yes. We're so focused on that, right? Like the career, who we're going to, it's not even who we're going to be, it's what we're going to do.
But they're interchangeable, aren't they?
Well, in the way that we talk about them
is what you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. The way we think about it, at least. Yeah.
And then, because that becomes our identity, of course, that's where we get really focused, right? Mm-hmm. And then as even more so now, I'm treading into empath and highly sensitive territory, as we feel different. Often we feel behind, or like we have something to make up for, or we have to put extra effort in, because the truth is things don't work for us like they do for other people. And so we do overwork. Or maybe in your case, I might flip it to, we're getting so much validation sometimes that there's being a good student in school could be validating for a lot of highly sensitives.
Totally. That was totally me. Like,
yeah, me too.
Yeah. I was like, I needed those good grades or I wasn't worthy.
Yes. And work can be kind of that same dopamine hit for our brains. Totally. So of course we're going to overwork.
Totally. Right? Yeah. Absolutely. I also think tell me what you think about this, but I think there's also something in there with as highly sensitive people tending to be really conscientious, and maybe it's all like linked up with perfectionism, right? Which is kind of what you were just saying, even like wanting to do it really well so that we can be validated. But then also the conscientiousness of even like wanting our work to to be really good so that it can support, our boss or, the organization that we work for or our clients really well, like to the best, highest possible degree.
Yes. And we're so aware, right? Because we're conscientious, but we're also aware of all of the details, right? Like our brains see so many details and we can't leave it often, so we have all this data that we're processing all the time. And often our mind will say, they're going to notice this or that or this or that. When maybe that's not important, but that's where the perfectionism can come in. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And I also think one other thing here that is really interesting is like, I don't know if you've gotten wind of this, but there is sort of like this modern narrative out there of like the way to be as a woman is like to be a superwoman.
Oh, yeah.
Like we got to do it all, right? We don't like just being a stay-at-home mom isn't enough anymore. Like we got to be great moms and we got to be amazing at our career and like juggle all the things. And again, I think that goes back to sort of how we tie what we do with our worth.
I even go back to, this will age me or date me. When I was a kid, there was that song on the radio for that perfume, Enjoli. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never, ever let you forget you're a man because I'm a woman and I wear this Enjoli perfume. Right? And I'm like, now that I hear that, I'm like, oh my gosh. Here I am, a little girl hearing this.
Oh my gosh.
Women have to be all of that. They have to work, come home and do the household chores, service their man.
Yes.
And make him happy.
It's like such a perfect example of exactly how we absorb these messages, right?
Yeah,
and like we're not even noticing that this is happening. So if some of the people listening to this are like, "Oh gosh, I totally tie my worth to my productivity and what I do," and like, of course you do. Like nothing's gone wrong with you. Like this is the water we swim in. This is what we've been taught. This is what we absorb. And we can't not absorb it living in this society. So it's not a personal flaw if anyone defines their worth by what they do. And yet it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Well, we're never going to get 100% away from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think you're making a really good point, Hannah. It is the water we swim in. It is important in this culture.
Yeah.
But there's more to life, right?
Yes. And here's my next question for you. What is the cost or the impact of tying our value to our productivity and then, or just like said in other words, overworking or putting our work ahead of the rest of our lives? What do you think is the cost on highly sensitive people's well-being and their relationships and such?
Well, I think it's very costly because if we're putting even our job ahead of ourselves, not even just our relationship with other people, but our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's my firm belief, and this is what I teach all of my clients, that we have to care for ourselves first as highly sensitives. That is the absolute foundation of the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Then you're not showing up at your job in your best.
Yeah.
Actually, you're not showing up in your marriage. You're not showing up in your parenting. You're not showing up anywhere.
Yes.
To be the person you want to be. So the cost is that you're exhausted. You're not who you really are.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. You're this version of yourself that you don't want to be. You're not living out your real values. And you're just this raggedy shell.
Yeah.
Showing up.
Yeah, totally.
And then you're like, why are things not going well at work? And why is my marriage kind of like bumpy?
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things I hear from women and my clients of course, is that they want to have more of the experience of feeling connected and close to their partner. And oftentimes, they're missing that, right? But what oftentimes I think they are not recognizing in the moment is so much of it is because they are not able to be fully available for connection because of all the rest of where their attention is going a lot, which is like work and all the other things. Right?
Well, and when we're not fully present with ourselves, we can't be fully present with other people, and we don't have a lot to give, like what you're saying.
Totally. Right? Yeah. I'm always like, one of the phrases I say the most frequently on this podcast is, we sensitive people can be highly insensitive when we're not centered.
Yes.
Meaning like, we can get easily stressed, right? And especially when we aren't taking care of ourselves, we're putting our all into work and such things. But that, like you said, it kind of leaves us like an empty shell. And then we can kind of walk around feeling more easily irritated, more resentful, more exhausted, more frustrated, all the things.
Of course.
Yeah. And then one more thing, this has been coming up with clients recently, is like the more that they're in that sort of stressed out, anxious, like, and sometimes that can go over into anxiety or overwhelm, the more quickly what I call the floss sight glasses go on, meaning we start seeing all the things that are wrong with our partner so much more easily. And then that whole, like, it can just kind of descend into more conflict, more unhappiness, all of that.
Yes. It's a spiral. I like to use with my clients the acronym. This is from the 12-step anonymous programs. The acronym is HALT. HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
HALT. Yeah.
And if you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, it's time to stop. And especially as empaths and sensitives, we need to feed ourselves. We need to rest. We need to deal with our emotions, and we need to tend to those things.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're speaking to, is that when we're spiraling into those fault-finding missions, that's where we're coming from, right?
Yes.
We're saying, you need to meet my needs.
Right.
And that's coming from that lack, that halt place.
Yes.
Instead of, oh, wait, I'm really tired, or I'm feeling lonely.
Yeah.
That's not my partner's or someone else's thing to fix.
Yes.
And so that's the time to just stop. And that's why it's HALT.
I love that acronym. That's great. Yeah. And it's, so what I'm hearing is like, HALT is also, it's also an opportunity to be like, oh, where can I meet my own needs here?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, am I hungry? Right? Am I tired? Have I been overworking?
Yes.
Yeah.
And are there emotions that I need to at least be aware of, anger or loneliness or something else, before I'm expecting someone else to tend to them?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I talk about doing a 180 or a pivot. So that sounds like what HALT is all about too. It's like, HALT, time to stop, time to pause, time to pivot to myself and take a look. Like, what's going on here? How am I feeling? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Yeah, I love it. So good. So what sounds like that's one of the tiny little shifts that we can make. But I want to ask you, what are some other thoughts or strategies that you have? And I remember when we were talking about this, you were talking about making the emotional shift from, our work serving, our life serving our work, to our work serving our life. I always get a little tongue-tied when I say that, because my husband's always saying this phrase, like he says it all the time, like work to live instead of live to work. Right? It's pretty much the same thing we're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, what I like to say before that, to kind of untongue tie it a little bit, is
Yeah.
that your job, and like, let's say you go into a 9 to 5, or even you're an entrepreneur, excuse me, an entrepreneur like you and I are,
Mm-hmm.
your business or your job is never going to turn around and look at you and say, go be a person now. You need to stop working and go be a human. It is never going to turn and say that to you. It is your job as a person, as a human, to be in charge of your life and to be in charge of your job.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's your
And
responsibility
yeah.
to step into that. Yeah.
And the way you do that is by adopting that belief that your job or your business is in service of the life you want to live. Whether it's
Yes.
income, fulfillment. Hopefully people are getting fulfillment out of their jobs and their businesses, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's secondary to having a life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. So making that shift to believing that we're here to work to live instead of live to work. Yeah.
And that your life is not in service to that company.
Yes.
Because when you put it that way, like when I had a job, if you came up to me and said, is your life in service of this insert company name? I would have been like, oh, heck no.
Yeah.
That's not my life.
Mm.
I have this whole life. Like, I go there and I do my thing and I get my paycheck, sure. But is the whole meaning of my life to show up at this
Right.
place? Or when I was a nurse, is the whole meaning of my life to show up at this hospital?
Right.
No.
But isn't it interesting that, so even with that awareness, but without stepping into that and like really like living from that belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to get in the moment when we're at work, like when something happens at work or when it's just a normal busy full day and we have that long to-do list, it can be easy to fall back into the old story or like to just forget and feel like our life is about working.
Right. So the trick I have for that.
What? Tell us.
And I just had a client do this. You put your life, like you look at a calendar, and you put your life in first and your job or your work in second.
Yes.
Just the simple act, even if like if you had a job where you have your shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't write your shifts in first. The simple act of putting the things in your life on your calendar first.
Yes.
And then adding work.
Yeah. And it's less about
practicing.
It's less about the result of looking at the calendar. It's more about the act of actually prioritizing in the moment and looking at like this thing that represents your time and your year, right? And putting your life first. Yeah.
Yes.
Love it.
What gets freed up in that exercise is not so much your time, but your energy. As you practice thinking, if I could design my life, right, any way I want it, and that my job is in service of my life, like when would I do my laundry? When would I go to the grocery store? Like, and would I spend my days off, my full days off, like, let's say, right, I had a client, she's spending her full days off doing laundry, going to the grocery store, cleaning the house. And she decided she didn't want to do it that way. She was like, forget that. On the way home from work, I'm going to stop at the grocery store one day. On another day, I'm going to do the laundry after work.
Yes.
And I'll be a little bit more tired, but then on my day off, I can actually go do something and enjoy my life. And I was
Totally.
like, A to the men. I was like, that is amazing. It was just from the shift of seeing it differently, right?
Yeah. 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 And it's also so interesting because I think that we as humans can get caught up in this line of thinking of like, someday I'll get to that, like taking care of myself and like making time for myself and doing the things I care about and want to be doing. But right now I'm too busy at work. Right. And putting it off and putting it off. And for most of us, and without that conscious choosing of prioritizing it, we just keep kicking it down the road. Right. So I know for me, in the last few years of building my business and having it, be really full time and watching myself, how easy it is to get just to work. It's taken a lot of very conscious choices to tweak my schedule. And like you said, like put in like every day, make sure I put in the middle of the day, like an hour and a half where I get to go for a walk and have my lunch, and scheduling like a meditation or like a breathing session. Those are some of my favorite self-care activities, like at 5 o'clock or at 4:45, depending on the day. And like putting those ahead of the places where I open up slots for clients, right? Because
Absolutely.
they're so important. Yeah. And also over the last year, I used to work more on the weekends. Like, oh, I just have to get this one thing done. And then it'd be like a few hours. And then I'd be like resentful that I didn't like, I don't know what I'd just be resentful about work in general because I wasn't allowing myself the time that I wanted to do the other things and be with my family. So I set boundaries around that for myself too. I'm like, nope, I'm making the decision. I don't work on the weekends. I get to enjoy my life and be with my family and take care of my body on the weekends. And it's made a big difference.
It made a big difference.
Yeah.
I think that's hard as entrepreneurs. We have to do that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's taken me a long time to get used to having to put those boundaries in for myself.
Mm.
And I'm not perfect at it, certainly, but it gets better and better all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have to have structure as well, but I can't be too structured or I get kind of squirrely. So there's that too.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be like, I've noticed for myself, like it can become just another thing on the to-do list. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to be careful about that too. Like, I don't want to feel like my like most favorite activity is like just another chore to check off my list.
Yeah, that would be sad.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, just like going back to the whole productivity focused nature of our culture. It's like, it's kind of easy, right? Because even our self-care activities can become like, oh, another thing to do. And like, see, I'm worthy.
Yes.
Because I did my meditation. Check.
Yeah. And and that goes back to something I was saying kind of towards the beginning about being present. And that's kind of the point of meditating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is learning to be in the moment. Mm-hmm. We're not meditating to check it off on a list. And so really getting away from that productivity mindset, it's learning to have value in the things that we do. Like, what do we really value? In, those canned cozy things that keep your soda cold. You can produce a million of them. That's a lot of production. That's a lot of productivity.
Yep.
Is that value? No. Well, that's my opinion. And I think I tend to see them laying around a lot. So I think they're not necessarily super valuable, right?
Yeah.
So productivity and value are not equal.
So good.
Right?
Yeah.
So why not focus on doing things that are valuable to us, that create happiness or that are in alignment with our values. I think the check marks, they do create those happy chemicals in our brains. So it is a matter of retraining our brains to be like, I did focus on happiness today, or I did focus on what I value today, so that we're still getting that little happy dopamine thing happening.
Yeah.
And not just, we don't want to end our day with a pile of can cozies, right? That's
Yeah. I think
right.
most highly sensitive people, going back to that conscientiousness and our deep care for the world and people, and like, of course, that for many of us, that probably doesn't equal value. Like, we want to make a genuine contribution of
Right.
value. Yeah. What you're saying, in other words, is like more isn't always better. More production isn't always better. And that's one of the things I've been working on a lot, is like, for example, like writing my email, my people on my email list, like 5 emails a week isn't necessarily better than putting my heart and love deeply into 1 email a week.
Correct.
Plus, it's a lot more fun for me to feel like I get to make this one like full of my heart, right?
Yes.
And not like, oh, I've got to write 5.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes because the brain, having absorbed all these societal messages, it's like, but I have to put out more and more and more. So for me, it's been this really interesting journey of like watching my mind and how it wants to tell me those stories and wants to be like, you have to, and produce, to coming back and like being like, what I'm putting in is enough.
Yes. And what you're putting out is enough.
Yeah.
And what helps me is to know that those things came out of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And, trying to be efficient and make machines in factories.
Yes.
Produce more widgets per hour.
Yes.
And that's how those ideas got embedded into our culture. Right? And I'm not a machine, and neither are you. And I don't want to be.
Totally. And like really connected with that even is this idea. I mean, it's not an idea. The fact that the work system and the industrial productivity whole thing, all of like our work week and our work day was designed for men.
Yes.
Of like who lived decades ago, who had a wife at home to take care of everything else for him. So he could go to work and produce.
Yes.
Because that was all that was needed. Everything else was ready. But now as women, we try to go like, we like take on that, like that's the way we're supposed to do it. And we go and we give it our all. And then we come home and we have all the rest to do.
Right.
I mean, and I think it really helps me to remember, like, I don't want to live in a system that was designed simply to produce because that's what was valuable back then and that was designed for men 100, 200 years ago. Like, that's not relevant to me now.
Right. Or even now, right? Like if you're a company like that makes tennis shoes, very popular tennis shoes that everybody buys, of course you want to make as many tennis shoes as buyers, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a volume business. But most of us are not in that business, right? Most of us in the information age are not in the business. And even if you have a job, we're not in the business of creating physical things in mass quantities anymore.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to create at scale. We're not marketing at scale, right? We're crafting one-on-one services or group programs, or we're working on a project at work that has a certain impact.
Yes.
And that's the value we need to be focused on in terms of our productivity.
So it's not the impact of that project, for example, actually can be undermined by the like urgency that our brain might have around it, like work faster, work harder, produce more, get it done, get it done, get it done. Tell me where I'm wrong.
You're exactly right. Because if we're approaching it like we're the big shoe manufacturer and we're not, there's a mismatch there. And we're not bringing our best. We're not bringing the right energy to bring the value and the work that needs to be brought to that situation.
Yes. So what do you think helps? What else do you think can help bring our best and bring the value, like that's really inherent in us, to the project, to our work, so that we're not focusing all of our energy there and giving away all our time to it?
Yeah, one thing that I've done, another thing I've done with my clients is I've had them divorce their identity from their job or their business.
Oh, wow. Love that.
And really look at, who are you separate from that?
Yes.
And write it out. And value all of those things. So you might have skills, you might have traits, you might have all of these things that you use at work, but you don't have to be at work to use them. And then also, what else is true about you? Are you a good singer? What do you enjoy? Do you have hobbies? Are you a great mom? Are you
yeah.
What else?
And I think as highly sensitive women, we have so many beautiful traits and parts of us that are so valuable and are actually, I mean, I talk about this a lot in the podcast and in my articles, is like the sensitivity, the care, the conscientiousness, the like love and awareness. And we bring naturally so much good stuff that's like really missing from our world. I think if we brought more of that, or if more people brought more sensitivity to their lives and each other, it would be such an amazing gift to the world. And I think it's so easy for us to overlook that. So like refocusing our awareness on how much value we bring, just being who we are naturally.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I love that, divorcing yourself from your identity around work. I don't know if that's what you said, but
yeah. It's like divorce that part, that your identity is not what you do for work. Get a divorce from that idea.
Yeah.
And you get to own all of who you are.
Yes.
Because you're that person everywhere you go.
Yes.
And people have been like, oh my gosh, this is so empowering. Because they have been giving that part of themselves away, essentially. Like that, the things that they do at work somehow belong to their job or their business, and they don't own it.
Yeah, so it's like super empowering. And I've seen it to be I haven't ever had any clients do that. This is a new concept to me, but like, as my clients have started to see and disown or disentangle, untangle their identity or their sense of worth from their work and their productivity. It's just so liberating and freeing. It just feels like this, like shackles come off.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's when, like, for one, I think it's easier to, ultimately, like, even think more clearly and show up more, as their full, essential, centered self, wherever they go, right? With their partner, with their kids, at their job.
Right. With full permission.
Yeah.
I had one client say, like, you mean I can tell people at work I can call them back in 10 minutes? Yeah, you can. And this is just flooring to her, to own her time and her ability to be empowered. And it
Yeah.
might sound silly to someone, but you know how when something never occurs to you and then it does, and you're like, oh my gosh, that never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I thought I had to blank, 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 because that's what you do,
Right. And it's almost like the kind of maybe perhaps for this person, like the unconscious thinking there is like, my value is in getting back to someone super fast. Right. But if she can
Yes.
trust like my value, like I'm so valuable that like this
Yes.
person is going to have no problem waiting 10 minutes. Of course, I'm that valuable.
Right.
There's no rush here.
Right.
There's so much here in trusting in our value.
Yes.
And yeah, like I said, since the new year, this was actually my new year, not resolution, but like my focus for this year was a much deeper trust in like what I know and my innate wisdom and my really innate value, like that I don't have to work so hard to prove it to the world, or that I don't have to work to prove it at all because it just exists, right?
Yes.
And living, I don't always remember to be in that space, but more and more I'm resting in that space. And it really makes work lighter. It makes me show up lighter. I mean, I just feel lighter. That's all. I feel lighter and more secure. Yeah, just way more relaxed in general. I mean, it has not made my work suffer. This year, I'm like my business is thriving. So, and so is my life more and more. So, such a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say it increases our confidence, which is
Yeah.
so attractive on all fronts,
Yes.
right?
100%.
When we're relaxed, we know who we are. We know what we're bringing to the table. We trust in our value. It's like we are bringing that fullness to our work. We're bringing that all of that in our everything that we do, and then we build on that, right?
Yes.
Whereas when we show up as unsure, other people are like, well, and we don't have these conversations necessarily, but they're like, well, if she's unsure, I need to be unsure. And that's how we can get down that highly sensitive kind of spinning rabbit hole thing that we do, right? And we don't even know how we got there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't know if this is kind of on that same theme. One of my clients, she was feeling unvalued at work. And when we kind of looked at that, it was a lot of what was going on there was she wasn't trusting herself and valuing herself. So she wasn't actually speaking her mind and speaking out her ideas. So like in a confident way, like she might like put them out really sort of in an insecure way. And so they were not being received as if, oh, this is a good idea. They were kind of just being overlooked. So it was like this perpetuating of this, like, they don't value me, I'm not valuable thing.
Right. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. And the shift there that we worked on was like just reminding her brain how incredibly valuable she was and how she had these amazing ideas that were really valuable. And it, lo and behold, like she started speaking up from that place, and like like people started hearing her and praising her at work, which is like, it's the coolest, right? Yeah, it's powerful.
It is. Yeah, I've had clients do very similar things. I had a client involved in a whole project she didn't, that was optional, that she didn't even want to be doing, that she hadn't even realized was optional. She's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I get to say no. And she got this whole thing off of her plate. So I don't have to do that anymore. That's incredible. Because it was something, she had checked with her boss about, and her boss was like, you can do it if you want to, but I'm not requiring that of you. And she had spent over a year doing this thing that she hated and didn't want to do because she thought she had to.
Yeah.
And when she, after, we're getting into her feeling more confident and trusting her own gut and being able to trust her yes and trust her no, and, go to the project person and say, actually, I need to step back from this now. And then she did. And it was like, it was fine.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. So good. Well, beautiful. Do you have any last tips or thoughts for us today?
I just really think taking care of yourself as an empath or highly sensitive. And my one tip is meditate. I'm on a soapbox. Meditate for 10 minutes every single day. Every empath and highly sensitive person, this is like oxygen to us. We need it to get us out of that low level fight or flight. And that will make everything so much better. So
Yeah.
that's my soapbox.
Yeah. I love it too. Yeah. And it's from like getting out of that fight or flight, and that meditation is so beautiful at helping us do that. We can see more clearly. We can observe where our mind goes and make more conscious choices about how we want to think about things and how we want to relate to our work and our partner and all that. Yeah.
Yes.
And how valuable we are. We can see it more clearly, right? When we're not fogged over by the fight or flight that we so easily slip into.
Yeah. And it just helps us to process.
Yeah.
And it helps us to just, bring the brain down and just get centered. And
Yes. So important. Well, Laurie, this has been really great conversation. So many good things. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to hear where listeners can find you if they want to learn more about you and hear from you more.
Yeah. So my website is lauriecarlson.com, LaurieCarlson. And that's where they can find me. And I'm on Instagram. I'm also at HSP Life Coach.
Perfect. Love it. Easy to find.
Yes.
And we'll put the direct links to those in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
And to all of you out there listening, be oh so well.